Picture this moment. It's 7:42 a.m. on October 15th, 2024. Hugh Coleman walks into conference room B on the second floor of Pinnacle Medical Manufacturing, and there's Bryce Patterson, the McKinsey consultant who's been here all of 7 weeks, sitting at the head of the table in a navy blazer with Carol Fisher from HR right beside him. That manila folder is already open on the table. Hugh knows immediately what's about to happen. But what Bryce doesn't know is that Hugh has been carrying a signed union contract in his toolbox for 18 years. A contract that's about to turn this entire conversation upside down. My name is Hugh Coleman. I'm 48 years old, and I've been at Pinnacle Medical Manufacturing in Canton, Ohio, for 18 years. Let me back up and tell you the whole story because the context makes this so much better. I got to the plant at 6:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, October 15th, 2024. I remember because it was right after the Columbus Day weekend, and the parking lot was emptier than usual. Just the night shift supervisor's pickup and a silver BMW I'd never seen before. Strange, but I didn't think much of it. I badged in, took the stairs up to the second floor, walked past the empty offices to my desk. Not a corner office or anything fancy, just the spot where I'd been sitting since March 2006. Set down my thermos, opened my laptop, and there it was. One calendar invite marked urgent, scheduled for 7:45 a.m. Subject line, role optimization meeting, attendance required. I just stared at that screen for a second because you know what that means, right? Nobody sends you a meeting invite with that kind of language unless something's about to change, and not in a good way. I clicked on it. Attendees. Me, Bryce Patterson, our new efficiency consultant, and Carol Fisher from HR. My chest tightened a little. Not panic, more like that feeling when you know the conversation is going to be unpleasant, but you don't know how unpleasant yet. Let me give you some background about who I was at this company, because it matters. I started in 2006 as a maintenance technician. That was my official title. Level 3 on the plant ladder. My job description, if you actually looked at the document HR had on file, said I was responsible for scheduled equipment maintenance, safety compliance documentation, and technical support. Pretty standard stuff. Starting salary was $48,000. By October 2024, I was making $82,000 base, plus overtime that usually brought it up to around $95,000. Not bad for a guy who started out with a Navy discharge certificate and an associate degree from Stark State College. The Navy taught me something important about systems. When I was stationed at Port Hueneme, I worked on construction equipment, bulldozers, cranes, generators. The old-timers used to say, "You don't just fix the symptom, Coleman. You understand the whole machine." That lesson stuck with me through everything that came after. But here's the thing. My actual job and my job description hadn't matched in about 15 years. See, when you work somewhere for nearly 2 decades, especially in manufacturing, you end up absorbing responsibilities that nobody else wants to do or knows how to do. It starts small. You fix one piece of equipment outside your lane because it's blocking production. Then someone asks you to fix it again. Then it becomes your thing, and before you know it, you are the only person in the building who knows how half the machinery actually works. I was that person. Let me give you some examples. The company's entire predictive maintenance system was something I'd built in 2012 because our old process was reactive and cost us about $200,000 a year in unplanned downtime. I automated the whole thing using vibration analysis, thermal imaging, and oil sampling schedules. We went from 47 unplanned shutdowns per year to 8. Nobody asked me to do it, I just did it. Saved the company probably $180,000 annually in avoided downtime costs. That's not me bragging, that's math. Equipment downtime on our medical device lines costs us about $15,000 per hour in lost production. Multiply that by the shutdowns we prevented, and you get the picture. Then there was the FDA compliance documentation. We manufacture Class 2 medical devices, which means everything has to be documented for FDA inspection. The company had this patchwork system where different departments used different software, and nothing talked to anything else. So in 2015, I built a unified tracking system that connected our German CNC machines, the Fanuc robots, and the quality control stations. Real-time documentation, automatic compliance reports, the whole thing. Our FDA inspection prep time dropped from 3 weeks to 4 days. I didn't get a bonus for that. I got a thank you in a team meeting. Oh, and the vendor relationships. Somehow, and I don't even remember how this started, I became the point of contact for every single one of our equipment suppliers. Haas for the CNC machines, Trump for the laser cutters, Siemens for the PLCs. If something went wrong, I was the one with direct lines to their field service engineers. I had their cell phone numbers. They had mine. These weren't just business relationships. When Klaus from Trump's service team came to the States, he'd stop by the plant just to say hello. When our Haas representative retired, he made sure his replacement knew to call me directly for any technical issues. I negotiated our Trump maintenance contract in 2021 and saved the company $85,000 over 3 years by bundling laser tube replacements with preventive maintenance. Did it on my own initiative, during my lunch break, because I knew we were getting overcharged. But none of this was in my job description. Officially, I was still a maintenance technician. And the thing is, I never asked for a promotion or a title change. I should have, but I liked the work. I liked knowing how everything fit together. I liked being the person people came to when something critical broke. Plus, I got decent raises every year, 3% to 5%. And my boss, the old plant manager, a guy named Raymond Walsh, appreciated what I did. He'd tell me in reviews, "Hugh, you're the backbone of this operation." He knew. He got it. Raymond had started at Pinnacle back in 1987, worked his way up from the floor. He understood manufacturing. Understood that knowledge doesn't come from textbooks. It comes from years of watching machines, listening to them, knowing when something sounds wrong even when all the gauges look normal. Raymond retired in August 2024, and that's when Pinnacle hired McKinsey to optimize operations. Bryce Patterson was 29 years old, 19 years younger than me, and he came from consulting, had the resume, the pedigree, all that, MBA from Northwestern. Talked a lot about operational efficiency and role clarity and eliminating waste. In his first plant meeting, he said, and I remember this exactly, "We're going to implement lean manufacturing principles. Everyone needs to stay in their lane so we can scale efficiently." I didn't think much of it at the time. New consultants always say stuff like that. But then he started asking questions. Lots of questions. Who owns the predictive maintenance system? Who manages vendor relationships? Who built the compliance tracking? And every time, the answer that came back was Hugh Coleman. And I could see it in his face during meetings, this kind of confusion, like he didn't understand why one person had his hands in so many things. To him, it probably looked messy, inefficient, but what he didn't understand was that manufacturing isn't like consulting. You can't just draw clean lines on an org chart and expect the machines to respect those boundaries. The thing about manufacturing is that everything connects to everything else. The CNC machine talks to the robot feeds the laser cutter output goes to quality control, and quality control data feeds back into the predictive maintenance system. It's all one big loop, and if you don't understand how the whole loop works, you can't optimize any piece of it. I tried to explain this to Bryce a few times. He'd nod politely and say something about cross-functional dependencies and process documentation, but I could tell he thought I was just being territorial. So October 15th, 7:45 a.m. conference room B. I walked in and Bryce was already there, sitting at the head of the table in that navy blazer and khakis. Carol from HR was next to him with a laptop and that manila folder. They both smiled when I came in. The kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Hugh, thanks for coming," Bryce said. "Have a seat." I sat down across from them, set my thermos on the table. "What's this about?" Carol opened the folder and slid a document across to me. "We're doing a comprehensive role audit across the plant," she said, "making sure everyone's responsibilities align with their job descriptions and pay grades." I looked at the document. It was my job description, the one from 2006. The one that said scheduled equipment maintenance, safety compliance documentation, technical support. Bryce leaned forward. "Hugh, you've been here a long time. You're clearly a valuable member of the team, but as we've been reviewing how work is distributed, we've noticed that you've taken on a lot of responsibilities that fall outside your role. The predictive maintenance system, vendor management, compliance tracking, those should really be owned by engineering or escalated to management." I just stared at him. "I built those systems, I understand," he said, "and that's appreciated. But going forward, we need you to focus on your core responsibilities. The things in your job description. We're bringing in a systems engineer next month. His name's Owen Campbell, and he'll be taking over ownership of the predictive maintenance and compliance systems. Vendor relationships will roll up to me. You'll transition everything over the next 4 weeks." I felt this weird calm settle over me. Not anger, not panic, just clarity. The same feeling I used to get in the Navy when a piece of equipment broke down and everyone was running around panicking, but I could see exactly what needed to be done. So you want me to stop doing the things I've been doing for 15 years? We want you to focus on what you were hired to do, Bryce said. He smiled again. Stick to your job description. You'll still have plenty to do. Equipment maintenance, safety documentation, technical support. That's important work. Carol nodded. This isn't a demotion or anything like that. Your title and salary stay the same. We're just realigning responsibilities. I looked at both of them for a long moment. Then I said, okay? Bryce blinked. Okay? Yeah, I said, if you want me to stick to my job description, I'll stick to my job description. Great, Carol said. She looked relieved. We'll set up a transition plan with Owen once he starts. I stood up, grabbed my thermos, and walked out. Here's what they didn't know. What nobody except Raymond Walsh knew, because he was the one who'd helped me set it up. Back in 2018, when I'd built the predictive maintenance system and the compliance tracking and basically kept the plant running through 3 different equipment crises, Raymond had gone to the ownership family and said, we need to protect our investment in Hugh's work. If he leaves, we're in trouble. Raymond had seen this kind of thing before. He'd watched good people get pushed out by new management who didn't understand what they actually did. He'd also seen companies lose millions of dollars worth of institutional knowledge when a key person walked out the door. So the Klein family approved something called a key person technical agreement. It was part of my union contract but filed separately. A side letter signed by me, Raymond, and Dorothy Klein, who represented the family ownership. The agreement said that if I left the company or was reassigned away from systems I'd developed, I retained technical ownership of all proprietary modifications, systems, and documentation created outside standard job duties. Specifically, the predictive maintenance algorithms, the compliance tracking system, and the custom safety modifications I'd made to our German equipment. The company had a license to use them, but I owned the intellectual property. And here's the important part. If the company wanted to transfer ownership of those systems to another employee, they had to get my written consent. And if I didn't give consent, the company had to either negotiate fair compensation or stop using them entirely. Raymond had buried this in the union grievance files. It wasn't in my personnel record. It wasn't in the standard contract files. It was tucked away with shop steward documentation from 2018, filed under key person risk mitigation. When Raymond retired, he'd pulled me aside on his last day and given me a copy. Keep this safe, Hugh, he said. You might need it someday. Companies forget that people matter more than processes. I'd stuck it in my toolbox and honestly forgotten about it. Until October 15th, 2024, 7:45 a.m., when Bryce Patterson told me to stick to my job description. I went back to my desk, opened my email, and I did exactly what Bryce asked. I stopped doing everything that wasn't in my job description. The predictive maintenance system, not my problem. Owen Campbell would own it when he started in 3 weeks. Until then, well, it wasn't in my job description to maintain it. The compliance tracking, same thing. Vendor relationships, those rolled up to Bryce now. Siemens issues, talk to Bryce. Trump maintenance schedules, Bryce. Haas programming modifications, not in my job description. I reset my work priorities to equipment maintenance, safety documentation, and technical support. Basic stuff. The kind of work you could find in any maintenance manual, and I waited. Now here's something important about manufacturing that Bryce didn't understand. When you stop doing predictive maintenance, things don't break immediately. Machines are designed with safety margins. Bearings that should last 1,000 hours might actually run for 1,200 hours before they fail. Belts that need to be replaced every 6 months might make it 8 months. But they will fail, and when they do, it won't be convenient. It took 4 days. On Friday, October 18th, at 10 to 23 a.m., one of our line supervisors, a guy named Joey Martinez, came over to my desk. Joey had been at Pinnacle almost as long as me. Started as a machine operator and worked his way up. Good guy, understood the equipment, and more importantly, he understood people. Hey Hugh, the Line 3 Haas is throwing a spindle temperature warning. Can you take a look? Sure, I said. I walked over to Line 3, looked at the CNC machine, and checked the error code. Spindle bearing temperature 15 degrees above normal. Normally, I'd run my predictive maintenance algorithm, check the vibration analysis from the last 30 days, cross-reference with the oil analysis, and determine if we needed to schedule bearing replacement or if it was just a cooling system issue. The whole process took about 15 minutes and would tell me whether we had hours, days, or weeks before a failure. Instead, I called Haas technical support. "Yeah, we've got a spindle temperature warning," I told them. "What's your standard recommendation?" "Shut down the machine and schedule field service," they said. "Could be bearing failure. We can have someone out there Tuesday?" "Okay," I said. I hung up and filled out a work order to shut down line 3. Joey looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Hugh, line 3 is scheduled to run the Caldwell order. That's $180,000 worth of parts. We can't just shut it down for 4 days." "Sorry," I said. "Without the predictive maintenance data, I can't diagnose the issue. Haas says shut it down. What about your vibration analysis stuff?" "The system you built, that system rolls up to Bryce now," I said. "You'll need to check with him." Joey went to Bryce. Bryce had no idea what vibration analysis was. He called me. "Hugh, what's this about vibration analysis?" "It's part of the predictive maintenance system," I said. "The one that's outside my job description now." "But can't you just run it this once? We're talking about a lot of money here." "I'd need authorization to work outside my job description," I said. "And I'd need to discuss updating my role scope with HR and the union rep." There was a long pause. "Fine, just fix the machine today. We'll sort out the details later." I didn't fix the machine. Line 3 stayed down for 4 days. The Caldwell order was delayed by a week. Here's the thing about the Caldwell medical contract. They weren't just any customer. They were developing a new cardiac monitoring device that had the potential to save thousands of lives, but they were working under FDA fast-track approval. Every day of delay pushed back their clinical trials. Every week of delay potentially meant patients who wouldn't get access to life-saving technology. But that wasn't in my job description either. That Friday, I got an email from Sandra Rivera, the VP of Operations. Subject line: "Line 3 production delay, urgent response needed." I replied, "This falls outside my current role scope. Please coordinate with Bryce Patterson for system access authorization." That was Friday. On Monday, October 21st, things started getting more interesting. Our Trumpf laser cutter started showing signs of beam degradation. The cut quality was dropping, and the system was throwing intermittent power fluctuation warnings. I knew exactly what it was. The laser tube was approaching end of life, probably had about 200 hours left, but the power supply modules needed recalibration to compensate for the reduced output. Normally, I'd check the laser tube hours against my maintenance schedule, cross-reference with the gas mixture logs, and either order a replacement tube or adjust the beam settings. Takes about 20 minutes. Costs maybe $50 in gas mixture adjustments. Instead, I called Trumpf service. "We've got beam degradation and power fluctuations," I told them. "Could be the laser tube," they said. "We'll need to send a field engineer to diagnose. Costs will be $3,500 plus parts, and we can have someone there Thursday." "Okay," I said. The laser stayed down for 3 days. We missed delivery on $95,000 worth of precision-cut medical device housings. 3 different customers called asking about their orders. One of them was a children's hospital in Cleveland that needed replacement parts for their surgical equipment. But coordinating with customers wasn't in my job description. On Wednesday, October 23rd, our FDA compliance system started throwing alerts. Not because anything was wrong, but because I'd set up automated reminders for documentation updates. The system needed operator validation every 30 days to maintain compliance certification. It's a simple process, really. You go through each production line, verify that the quality control documentation matches the manufacturing records, and digitally sign off on the compliance status. Takes about 15 minutes if you know what you're looking for. I'd been doing it automatically for so long that I barely thought about it, but it wasn't actually in my job description. Safety documentation was, but FDA compliance validation was a separate process that I'd built and maintained on my own initiative. So I generated a work order for system maintenance outside job scope and sent it to Bryce. Bryce didn't know what FDA validation meant. He forwarded it to Sandra. Sandra forwarded it to Carol in HR. Carol sent it back to me with a note: "Please handle routine system maintenance." I replied, "FDA compliance documentation is outside my current job description. Please coordinate with Bryce Patterson for role clarification and system access authorization." The validation didn't get updated. Now, here's something important about FDA regulations. They don't care about your internal company politics. They don't care about role optimization or lean manufacturing principles. They care about one thing: Can you prove that every medical device that left your facility was manufactured according to approved specifications? If you can't prove that, you lose your FDA certification. If you lose your FDA certification, you can't manufacture medical devices. If you can't manufacture medical devices, you shut down. The compliance audit happens automatically every month. On Friday, October 25th, at exactly 12:01 p.m., our internal compliance system ran its monthly check. It found 27 validation items that hadn't been updated in 35 days. The system immediately flagged us as non-compliant and sent automated notifications to the FDA, our insurance carrier, and all of our major customers. By 2:30 p.m., we had 3 customers on the phone asking about our compliance status. By 4 p.m., our insurance carrier was asking for documentation. By 4:45 p.m., we had received an automated email from the FDA scheduling a surprise inspection for the following week. The plant was now 72 hours away from losing FDA certification for our medical device production. Once you lose that certification, it takes a minimum of 6 months to get it back, assuming you can demonstrate that you fixed whatever caused the compliance failure. 6 months without FDA certification meant shutting down 75% of our production. It meant laying off 180 people. It meant breaching contracts worth $18 million. It meant quite possibly the end of Pinnacle Medical Manufacturing. At 2:47 p.m., I got a calendar invite. Emergency meeting, operational continuity, scheduled for 4 p.m. attendees. Me, Bryce, Sandra, Carol, and 2 people I'd never seen before. I printed out a copy of my key person technical agreement and stuck it in my pocket. Then I walked downstairs to the break room and got a cup of coffee. Joey Martinez was there, looking stressed. "Hugh," he said, "what the hell is happening? Half our equipment is down, customers are calling every hour, and now I'm hearing we might lose our FDA certification?" I took a sip of my coffee. "I'm just following my job description, Joey, like Bryce asked me to." Joey stared at me for a long moment, then he started to smile. "You magnificent bastard. You're doing exactly what they told you to do." "That's right. How long do you think it'll take them to figure it out?" I checked my watch. About 1 hour and 13 minutes. I showed up at 3:58 p.m. Bryce was already there, looking like he hadn't slept. Sandra was next to him, typing furiously on her laptop. Carol was there with a different folder this time. And the 2 strangers turned out to be Dorothy Klein from the Klein family ownership, and a guy named Lance Turner who was apparently company legal counsel. This was no longer a department meeting. This was a legal situation. Dorothy Klein was in her early 60s, gray hair, sharp eyes, and the kind of presence that comes from making difficult decisions for 40 years. Her grandfather had founded Pinnacle in 1979, and she'd been running it since her father stepped down in 2003. She didn't look happy. Bryce started, his voice tight. "Hugh, we need to talk about what's been happening this week." "Okay," I said. "Line 3 has been down for 8 days. The laser cutter failed for 3 days. We're facing FDA compliance issues, and every time we ask you to help, you say it's not your job." "That's correct," I said. "You told me to stick to my job description." "I'm sticking to my job description." Sandra leaned forward. "Hugh, you know these systems, you built them. We need you to maintain them." "I understand," I said. But on October 15th, Bryce told me to focus on my core responsibilities and transition ownership of those systems to other people. I'm just following instructions. Lance, the lawyer, opened a briefcase. "Mr. Coleman, are you refusing to perform work that's critical to the company's operations?" "No," I said. "I'm performing all the work outlined in my job description. If the company wants me to do additional work, we should probably update my job description and discuss compensation." Dorothy Klein was watching me carefully. She hadn't said anything yet, but I could see her putting the pieces together. Bryce took a deep breath. "Okay, fine. What would it take for you to just keep doing what you've been doing until we figure this out?" I pulled my toolbox over and opened the side compartment. The compartment where I'd kept that union contract addendum for 6 years. I opened it and slid the document across the table. "Before we talk about that," I said, "I think you should read this." Bryce picked it up. "What is this? Key Person Technical Agreement. Signed in 2018 by me, Raymond Walsh, and Dorothy Klein. It's filed with the union contract documentation under Key Person Risk Mitigation." Dorothy's eyes widened slightly. She remembered now. "Oh," she said quietly. Bryce scanned the document. I watched his face change, confusion, then realization, then something close to panic. He handed it to Lance. Lance read it, frowned, and read it again. Is this enforceable? Bryce asked. Lance looked at Dorothy. Did ownership actually approve this? Dorothy nodded slowly. Yes. Raymond brought it to us as a risk mitigation measure. Hugh had built several critical systems, and we were concerned about knowledge dependency. The agreement was meant to protect both the company and Hugh's contributions. I remember the board discussion, she continued. Raymond said, if Hugh walks out the door, we lose millions of dollars worth of institutional knowledge. This protects everyone. Bryce's voice was getting strained. So you're saying we can't use the systems he built, according to this? Lance said, if the company wants to transfer ownership or modify these systems without Mr. Coleman's consent, he can either demand fair compensation or revoke usage rights entirely. Sandra had gone pale. Hugh, the predictive maintenance system alone, we run it on 23 pieces of equipment. Without that, we're back to reactive maintenance. That's hundreds of thousands in downtime costs. The compliance system, Dorothy added, if we lose FDA certification, we're looking at $18 million in breached contracts and potential layoffs for 180 people. I know, I said. I built those systems to prevent exactly these kinds of problems. Bryce was starting to sweat. How much? He asked. What do you want? I'd done the math over the weekend, and I'd talked to Joey Martinez, who'd talked to some of the other long-term employees. The union guys were solidly behind me. They'd watched me get passed over for promotions while doing the work of 3 people. They'd seen consultants come and go, each one trying to fix things that weren't broken. The predictive maintenance system saved approximately $180,000 per year in avoided downtime. The compliance system saved us about $120,000 annually in FDA prep costs and avoided violations. The vendor relationships and custom equipment modifications saved another $85,000 per year. Total annual value, $385,000. Over the 6 years I'd been running these systems, that was over $2.3 million in documented savings. I'll transfer technical ownership of the predictive maintenance system, compliance tracking, and equipment modifications for $650,000, I said. Paid out over 18 months. Plus, I want my role reclassified to senior plant engineer, reporting directly to Sandra at a salary of $105,000 base with a 15% annual bonus target. And I want final approval authority on any equipment decisions that affect systems I've built. The room went completely silent. Bryce looked at Lance. Lance looked at Dorothy. Dorothy looked at me. That's a lot of money, Bryce said. No, Dorothy said firmly. It's fair market value. Probably under market considering the cost of rebuilding these systems from scratch, the lost production time, and the regulatory risks. We could just build new systems, Bryce said. But his voice lacked conviction. You could, I agreed. How long do you think that would take? 8 months. A year. How much production do you lose in the meantime? What happens to your FDA certification? What about the Caldwell contract and the cardiac monitoring devices that could save lives? Sandra closed her eyes. The FDA inspection is scheduled for Monday. If we fail, we lose certification immediately. Dorothy stood up. I need to make some calls to the other family members. Bryce, Sandra, let's meet tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. Hugh. Can you keep the critical systems running for 24 hours while we sort this out? If I'm being compensated for work outside my job description, yes. We'll pay you consulting rate, $125 an hour, effective immediately for any work on systems outside your standard duties. I nodded. That works. She looked at Bryce. Fix the compliance system, get line 3 running, do whatever he tells you to do. Then she walked out, followed by Lance and Sandra. Carol gathered her materials and left without saying a word. Bryce sat there for a moment, staring at the table. Finally, he looked up at me. I don't understand, he said. Why didn't you just tell me about this agreement from the beginning? You didn't ask, I said. You told me to stick to my job description. I did exactly what you asked. But people could have been hurt. The Caldwell contract, the FDA certification, all those jobs. Yes, I said. That's what happens when you optimize away the people who actually understand how things work. I stood up and walked toward the door. Then I stopped and turned back. Bryce, you're not a bad guy. But you made the mistake of thinking that just because you couldn't see the value in something, it didn't have value. Manufacturing isn't like consulting. You can't just reorganize it on paper and expect it to work better. He didn't respond. They met the next morning without me. I found out later from Sandra that Dorothy had called an emergency family meeting and presented them with the situation. The choice was simple. Pay me what I was asking, or watch the company potentially collapse. The Klein family took 15 minutes to decide, at 11:15 a.m. On Saturday, October 26th, I got an email from Carol in HR. Subject line, updated position offer, senior plant engineer. The offer was everything I'd asked for, $650,000 paid out at $36,111 per month for 18 months. Base salary of $105,000 and $15,000 and $15. Percent bonus target. New title, senior plant engineer. Direct report to Sandra Rivera. Final approval on equipment decisions. There was also a clause I hadn't asked for, in recognition of Mr. Coleman's contributions to Pinnacle Medical Manufacturing's operational excellence. The company agrees to issue 8,000 stock options at current valuation, vesting immediately. I signed it on Monday, October 28th, at 9 a.m. in Carol's office. Dorothy was there, Sandra was there, Bryce was not. The first payment, $36,111, hit my account on November 15th. I was sitting at my desk when I got the bank notification. I just stared at it for a long time. Bryce's contract was terminated 2 weeks later. McKinsey reassigned him to retail optimization. On his last day, he stopped by my desk. For what it's worth, he said, I learned something. What's that? That efficiency isn't just about organizing the work, it's about understanding the work. I nodded. That's a start. 18 months later, the Klein family sold Pinnacle to a larger medical device company for $95 million. My stock options were worth $52,000. Today, I'm still at Pinnacle. My title is Senior Plant Engineer. I manage a team of 5 technicians, including Owen Campbell, who turned out to be a good guy and a quick learner. We're integrating our systems with the parent company's operations, and they actually value the institutional knowledge we bring. The $650,000 I finished getting paid in April 2026. Most of it went into my retirement fund, but I also bought a small farm outside Canton. 12 acres, a workshop, and peace and quiet. Sometimes the best revenge is just giving people exactly what they ask for. And sometimes, if you're patient enough, it turns out better than you ever imagined. The invisible work that keeps everything running only becomes visible when it stops, and by then it's usually too late to fix what you've broken.